know, they're bound to sense something, aren't they? Because they're connecting on like a virtual plane. So, can you imagine what it was like when Posh first met Beckham? They were the epicenter of a non-stop, nationwide virtual shack. Nah.
So, you guys probably know me. I rarely respond to videos on YouTube individually because I usually like to look at large trends in aggregate and in toto. However, a couple weeks ago I saw a video from a content creator whose work I used to actually enjoy quite a bit that seemed ripe for a sort of impromptu case study of social identity and parasocial relationships in online communities, particularly in how that intersects with celebrity worship and indoctrination into political beliefs. So today we're going to be looking not at general statistics, but at a single individual source. This guy, Quinton Reviews, and his video on far-left content creator Natalie Wynn, better known as Contrapoints. Like I said, I don't make response videos, so be assured this one will have its share of citations, because as much as I want to just dunk on the absurdity of this video and this guy in general, oh, and I will, this is not meant in any ill faith either towards Quinton or towards Contrapoints. And because I know her fans can be a bit twitchy.
How could he say that? MacGyver is my world. Richard Dean Anderson just pissed off the wrong Richard Dean Anderson fan.
Let me preface this by saying I don't dislike Contrapoints. I don't really dislike Quinton Reviews. I disagree with her politically on nearly everything, but she produces well-made content, and I can appreciate that. I also don't want people to go and bully Quinton for this embarrassing video. What I want to try to do is explain what's going on here from a communication and psychological, particularly media psychology standpoint, by looking at parasocial relationships, fandoms, and persuasion. Because where this all becomes a concern to me and why I felt the need to respond to it is when I see videos like this from an arguably popular content creator in what I can only describe as an active attempt to inspire others into the indoctrination that he himself has seemingly undergone via his parasocial relationship and interactions with Contrapoints, and a complete obfuscation, as far as I can tell, of personal self-identity with social identity being made possible given the extreme power and influence that influencers can have on others when we form a parasocial relationship with them. And so today, let's examine this case study, and we'll look at some of the social science and the communication phenomena that are going on here, because I'm Maiden Paladin, and as always, there's research on all of this. Okay, hang on for a second. Stop, before we go forward. I apologize, we're not going to pause at every frame, but we are certainly going to pause on the first one, because you know what you're in for from this first frame. Truly, it says 1,000 words. Everything that you expect about this guy, if you've never seen him before, and expect him to say, oh, he's gonna say. So, viewer discretion is advised. Yes, mocking someone's appearance is a low blow, it's not an argument, it's not what I want to do, which is why I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna make jokes about the way this guy looks. But I am gonna joke about the way that this whole thing is shot and put together, and the immediate lack of energy that just this first frame gives off. And the fact that he really just kind of looks like a Ben Garrison caricature of a soy boy. I mean, let's be honest. Get some energy, dude. Don't stand in front of the same color scheme as your shirt. I'm not trying to pick on you, Quinton. I'm saying that if you like Contrapoint's energy and style so much, come on, man, put in a little bit of effort. Also, in before Quinton gets this video taken down for bullying or something, because he's sure done that crap before.
It's funny to think that when I first went to VidCon years and years and years ago, I was an anti-SJW grifter living in my mother's basement, dreaming of flying off to California to go ahead and meet my fellow skeptics. And if anything, meeting those people for real pushed me further away from them than anything else could.
I don't know if I would describe it as years and years ago, but you know, maybe time moves quickly when you're fundamentally changing everything about yourself to be more like someone that you have a parasocial relationship with. And that's where I already, again, have to pause and talk a little bit about the social psychology behind everything Quinton is talking about here. And I apologize because before I can go break down the rest of the video, I do have to describe some of the theories and the data and the research that I'll be using as a framework to assess this. Parasocial relationships, you've heard me say that word a couple times. That describes the way people feel towards media figures that lacks a typical dualistic route of frequent communication in both directions. That is, we talk to our friends, they talk back to us, and we form relationships with people in this way, no duh. But the human brain did not evolve in the presence of media, let alone social media. And as such, we tend to see media figures similarly to the way that we see our real-life friends, even though we're not engaging in bi-directional communication in most cases. For example, I'm a big Trekkie, right? So I feel like I have a kind of parasocial relationship with Spock, even though there's no opportunity for bi-directional communication between myself and a space elf played by a guy who died a couple years ago.
It does something for you. Yes, indeed it does, Captain. It makes me uncomfortable.
But there is some capacity when we consider that media figures all now have Twitters. They all make public appearances at places like VidCon. There is a possibility for not simply unidirectional communication with these media figures. But it's not actually necessary. We feel as if we know media figures because our brains are not evolved to see them fundamentally different from our actual friends. It's the reason someone can tell you that they know a character and they really feel it. They feel like that person is their friend because of a parasocial relationship. But with the advent of social media, it makes these media figures, these celebrities, whatever you want to call them, far more accessible to not just have that one-way communication, but instead to communicate back and forth. And that can make that relationship feel even stronger, even more real. I doubt he knows any of this, but I think based on what he says here, it's pretty evident that it was VidCon and meeting Contrapoints that set all of this off. It was taking that parasocial relationship to the next level.
And thus made all of the petty nonsense that I was seeing going on in my own community feel a lot less worthy of my time. And it was because of VidCon last year that I met Natalie Wynn at the Cheesecake Factory, and having absolutely no idea who she was, I decided to go home and binge a bunch of her channel.
First of all, there's a lot to be said about conventions and meetings and things like that, and sadly there's not a lot of empirical evidence about it. But it makes sense that spending time with people that you share something in common with only bolsters identification with that person and with that person's shared social groups. We can see this in Lex Hagen Larson and Lundenberg 2014 in a study of Twilight fans, who found, unsurprisingly, that the more they identified with being a Twilight fan, both emotionally and cognitively, the more likely they were to plan to attend a Twilight convention or event, which in addition to personal involvement with the franchise, accounted for 33% of variance in intention to attend these events. And it stands to reason that attendance bolsters personal and social identity. It's also a bit of a chicken and the egg argument in that we can't tell if identification made them more likely to go, or being more likely to go made them identify more with their fandom. In terms of how this fandom involvement can further alter behavior or beliefs is illustrated in Plant et al. 2014, who found that people who identified as a fan of something that promoted ideas of global citizenship, something like Star Trek again, a good example, then the fans of that thing were more likely to identify themselves as global citizens, and subsequently be more likely to promote social justice, diversity, empathy, helping, sustainable environments, and responsibility for others. If you're a fan of a media figure who holds certain values, it's likely that you will end up holding those values as well. Again, it's just a correlation, but it's related. And it's not hard to see why. But hey, we always gotta show the data that what this appears to be is creating a cycle of further identification via interaction, which is what I think happened here, and actually probably happens to a lot of people at events like VidCon, where they get to go hang out with people that they're fans of online. It exacerbates or accelerates identification and increases that parasocial relationship strength.
I want to record this historic moment because I don't want to wake up tomorrow and find out that this was all part of a dream. All right. Because I've had this dream before, many times.
Otter and Palmgreen 2000 developed an instrument for measuring parasocial relationships, and found that having an affinity for the medium, which I would assume that most attending VidCon have for the medium of YouTube, the stronger parasocial relationships with a media figure become. And moreover, that perceptions of the reality of a piece of media, something that certainly must be incurred when you meet a media figure face to face, does in fact create a stronger parasocial identification with that media figure. My fear is where this becomes obsessive, because it kind of looks like that's what's going on here.
She is our dark queen, our glorious mother and comrade.
Over there, friend, you might need to slow down.
McCutcheon, Lange, and Horan 2002 looked at the ways different types of parasocial relationship strength is produced by disparate types of fan involvement and disparate degrees of behavioral impact. Fan intensity ranges from anti-fans at level 1 to pathological obsessive fans at level 8, and can include a variety of reasons for which people follow different celebrities online or offline, including appreciating someone's skills, finding them hot, viewing them as a role model, feeling very similar to them in terms of personality, that's called homophily, viewing the person as a friend, a coworker, or even a hero, and includes the desire to sometimes protect, or in contrast, be nurtured by online mommy. Ugh.
You make me sick, you big baby! Baby want a bottle? A big dirt bottle?
Chen 2016 applied these kinds of parasocial relationships to YouTubers in particular, and found that people often tend to base their personal identities, the way that we feel about the self, on the people that they watch online, and often come to reflect and mimic them. For example, in his analysis of Taiwanese YouTubers, Chen found that a 28-year-old man, we'll call him Mark, said the most important thing for him is to copy the original concept from celebrities' works and then input my own factors or ideas and revise them. It might look like celebrities' works, but I only borrow from high-profile celebrities to enhance my ideas. And the high-profile bit appears to matter quite a lot, both for consumers and for content creators, as people who produce content may feel better through the mimicry of other popular figures. As another respondent, a 32-year-old man, reported that he felt overjoyed when viewers on YouTube liked his cover of a song from international Japanese pop star Utada Hikaru. As I recently discussed in a previous video, people tend to put their best face forward online. It's Walther's hyper-personal model, and thus people are not entirely who they appear to be, but rather they develop a digital sense of the self, often based on the mimicry of their own idols and the parasocial relationships that they form with popular online figures. Popularity, we can then see, plays a big role here, and Quinton has admitted this. Natalie is basically the queen of BreadTube, right?
Contrapoints is the only YouTuber. All other YouTubers are cancelled. As far as I'm concerned, she is the most subscribed to personality literally everywhere because no one else on the internet exists.
This popularity has an effect both on belief and on behavior of the viewer regarding those parasocial relationships with YouTubers. Rasmussen, 2018, reports that people are more likely to feel popular YouTubers are their friends, and the more popular a YouTuber is, the more credible he or she is perceived of. This affects behavior as well, as while 53% of Rasmussen's participants said they would purchase a product reviewed by a moderately popular YouTuber, 68% said that they would buy a product that was promoted by a popular one. Once you start getting into purchasing, now we end up in the problem of cognitive dissonance. Seeing the physical manifestation of your relationship with a personality, particularly something that you paid for, means that you have a vested interest in them, and a vested interest in maintaining that relationship so as to not contradict your previous actions, buying something from them, supporting their channel, subscribing. We want to maintain internally consistent.
Which is why it's a good thing I discovered Vitalomax Plus. Every evening before I start writing or shooting a video, I insert 2 Vitalomax Plus suppositories for a sustainable blast of power.
We can see this further in Sokolova and Kefi, 2019, who found that attitude homophily, that is holding similar opinions to a creator on YouTube, in addition to their physical attractiveness, was related to greater perceived credibility of the creator, and that credibility can have a major effect on purchasing behavior. Additionally, homophily and social attractiveness and popularity were all related to more parasocial interactions. And together, along with credibility, parasocial relationships explained 48.5% of the variance in intention to financially support creators by buying the products that they promote. Moreover, when it comes to politics, you're never going to convince someone of something that they're already invested in, as seen in Cohen et al. 2018, who found that people only tend to consume media that already aligns with their existing beliefs and attitudes. And although some research has shown that conservatives may have a wider latitude of acceptance for alternative opinions and alternative news sources, generally, a lot of people tend to avoid hearing anything that doesn't conform with what they want to hear. This is, again, cognitive dissonance. Because when our actions and our beliefs are incongruous, it causes psychological discomfort. The question then is, how do people get this way? How do you make a partisan? How do you make a radical? This is probably a good time to talk about another important aspect related to developing parasocial relationships, which is a perception that the person is authentic and real, something that YouTubers try to do all the time and often fail at in terms of their apologies.
Oh, boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
But are more than capable of, with their vlogs and their direct address to the audience, something that's uncommon in traditional media. When you go and turn on the television, very rarely outside of news programs, is the actor directly addressing the audience. And this is in line with Berger and Calabrese's 1975 uncertainty reduction hypothesis, which posits that the more we know about people, the more we tend to like them. An interesting study published just a few days of my recording this, from Anthionis, Schoten, and Walther, 2019, found that people who engaged in text communication online tend to fall more in love, or at least feel more positively about somebody that they talked to online when they subsequently met them face to face. And this is further reflected in what we've already looked at, what we saw with parasocial relationships in the McCutcheon, Lunge, and Horan data, who found that pathological and very interactive fans who wanted to potentially meet their idols were also those who tended to know a large amount about the idol's personal life. They were invested in the celebrities that they followed.
I can't believe I'm on a date with BoJack Horseman. I feel like that anonymous girl from chapter 8 of your book, mixed with the pluck and determination of that anonymous girl from chapter 12 of your book.
We don't need to dwell on the past.
What makes someone popular and encourages parasocial relationships on YouTube in particular was assessed by Furchard et al. 2017, who found that content creators who disclosed more information about themselves, be it positive, negative, or neutral, were seen as more authentic, and as such, our uncertainty towards that person is reduced and our parasocial relationships are enhanced. It's pretty simple to do this. Using a set, looking at the camera, makes people seem more realistic and more authentic than other types of content, such as, let's say, gameplay footage. That's the kind of things that Contrapoints does, and that's why she is such a powerful parasocial relationship for someone like Quinton.
There's something about seeing a vast sea of pale, chubby YouTubers with beards born out of their lack of motivation to shave, and all of them wearing clothes which don't quite fit their bodies.
Oh hey look, it's like we could see the entirety of Feminist Frequency's Patreon list in one screenshot. A group of people for whom there is never and never could be enough gamer girl bathwater in the world to possibly sustain them.
Which makes one question, why does my personal ideology seem to appeal almost exclusively to people who look like me, people who act like me, and most importantly, people who live like me?
This might seem like he's being self-disparaging in order to just take a jab at himself and be funny, and it is, but from a persuasion standpoint, it's also something else. What he's actually doing, cogently or not, is providing a weakened form of the arguments he's about to make, if you can call them that. He paints himself here as one of these poor unfortunate souls who at one point believed in the wrong think ideas, but he has now seen the light of Contrapoints, and thus you can too. This is what's called inoculation, and it's an effective persuasion tactic, in that when you provide a strongman argument, a weakened argument, that represents the opposing side before beginning your attempts at persuasion, you take the wind out of the sails of opposing arguments. Much like a vaccine gives a patient a weakened form of a virus which is easy for the body to fend off, so are these kinds of mild concessions a form of inoculation toward an idea. I don't think he's doing it consciously, but inoculation can work even unintentionally to persuade others. A lot of persuasion is unintentional.
Yeah. Okay. What she said, that's what I'm thinking, and, yeah.
The seminal study of inoculation was conducted by Pfau and Burgoon in 1988, who described inoculation as a resistance strategy designed to strengthen existing beliefs against change, as well as to prevent outside persuasive influence. In their foundational work, they asked undergraduates to evaluate their opinions towards a local Republican and Democrat politician, who were both running for office, and provided them with an article that attacked the politician's person or their politics, while some students also saw an inoculating article beforehand that attempted to dismiss the attacks that were made subsequently. They found that participants who saw the inoculating message were less persuaded by the attacks made afterwards, both towards the politician and their person, and it also inoculated them against persuasive messages and increased their likelihood to vote for said candidate. Unsurprisingly, this was most potent in people who already strongly identified with the political party of the attacked politician. Thus, inoculation has two primary aspects. First, to defend existing beliefs by beating down a simplistic version of opposing arguments, and by preempting anticipated counter-arguments. For this reason, inoculation finds itself well at home when it comes to political messages, hence why Sasbo and Pfau 2002 described inoculation as, quote, appropriate for any context where strong-held attitudes are vulnerable to challenge, which makes this plea for others to join in his worship of Natalie and her political opinions rife for the use of this type of inoculation. More recent research indicates that inoculation has a wide berth of its effects across related topics, as Parker Raines and Ivanoff 2016 found that inoculation towards a single topic was related to more resistance towards persuasive messages regarding related but not directly assessed topics. They provided participants with an article that inoculated them against counter-arguments on the efficacy of X-rays in determining and detecting tuberculosis, and they found that those who had read the inoculating article were more resistant to persuasive messages about other medical topics, including penicillin, visiting the doctor, just brushing your teeth. The implication is that even minor inoculation, like disparaging those who hold counter-attitudinal positions to Quinton, that they're all also schlubs who live in their mom's basement, is a powerful persuasion tactic whether he knows it or not. It's not a great attempt at inoculation because, like I said, I have no reason to believe that he studied persuasion theory, but it's kind of the thing about communication research. It's no duh in nature, and thus plenty of people use these techniques, often ineffectually and often unknowingly. I spent this whole time talking about this because it's important to point out that this isn't just intended to be self-disparaging in a YouTube humor kind of way. It's also designed to denigrate the group he's about to further disparage by providing a weakened form of the argument. This is his starting inoculation, and it's only going to get worse from here, friends.
The realistic background of my beliefs was that they were born from a lack of context of the outside world.
At least he seems to recognize the parasocial contact hypothesis, as proposed by Schiappa, Gregg, and Hughes 2006, which is that we tend to like groups more that we've not been exposed to in real life when we see positive portrayals of those groups in media, although I doubt he would put it in so many words. In the seminal case, Schiappa, Gregg, and Hughes found that people were more accepting of homosexuals when they had few or no gay friends after watching an episode of Will and Grace.
Ha! Gay!
Being exposed to positive exemplars of new ideas or new groups that we don't have experience with makes us more accepting of that group or that idea.
I lived in a basement. I spent all my time making slightly edgy movie reviews for YouTube.
Slightly edgy movie reviews? Like the one that you stopped midway to rant about how
I fucking hate Trump. And I rarely ever talk to anyone other than myself. Going to VidCon made me look at people and say, you're real. I have to talk to you like you're real, and I have to work to understand you like you're a real person.
Look, meeting people in real life, face-to-face communication, being with real people, trumps, pun intended, the deleterious effects of prolonged social media exposure that we've seen do exist, particularly when you're a person with low self-esteem and admittedly more of a loner. Of course face-to-face felt like a relief to you, Quinton. However, as we're about to see, he merely is switching from one group of parasocial relationships into another group of parasocial relationships that he was exposed to after this face-to-face contact at VidCon. But specifically, the internet has a bunch of weird effects on human communication and psychology. Namely, what we're looking at here is the hyperpersonal model and social information processing theory. Walther in 1996 posited the hyperpersonal model, wherein because everyone online is able to communicate asynchronously, they're also able to create an ideal representation of themselves. And as such, no one online is really being real, but instead only reflecting back upon each other in a cyclical manner, the manifestations of who we want to be, not necessarily who we are. This makes it very easy to fall in love with someone that you barely know online, because you only see the best side of that person, and not his or her flaws. Social information processing theory, also from our boy of seminal internet research and human communication, Walther 1992, posits that we take in information about people online in little sips. Hey, social information processing theory. Apt acronym, right? Rather than all at once. Because we only see this curated version of the person. We only get a little sip of who they are. This is what we call cues filtered out. We're missing part of the entire equation. When you meet someone in a face-to-face, normal kind of environment, you see everything about them. And it grounds that other person as truly human and flawed as we all are. That's not what we get online. And it's why people can seemingly so easily fall in love with another person that they have a parasocial relationship with. Or that they've just talked to a little bit on the internet. Particularly so when you get to meet them in person and go to the Cheesecake Factory.
It made modern social issues a lot more legitimate to me and made me care a lot more about the real world, and thus made all of the petty nonsense that I was seeing going on in my own community feel a lot less worthy of my time. And it was because of VidCon last year that I met Natalie Wynn at the Cheesecake Factory.
It's a bit odd to hear a grown man say the term Cheesecake Factory with the same excitement that John Podesta surely says cheese pizza, so weird flex, but okay.
Having absolutely no idea who she was, I decided to go home and binge a bunch of her channel.
Yeah, people have noticed politics have suddenly started cropping up in your videos. This couldn't be a manifestation of your parasocial relationship and the new social identity that you have developed around that parasocial relationship or anything, now could it?
I hate Trump.
And I think no other person has more influenced not only the sort of content I want to make, but also the person I want to strive to be.
Why do you want to be Contrapoints? Is it because you really like her content? Or is it because she's famous and beloved by the mainstream media? Or is it just because you want social support for your own wokeness? I'm not sure which. We've seen already the power of credibility and parasocial relationships on greater support for personality, including purchasing behavior. And because Contrapoints is probably the most influential influencer on BreadTube, think back to the words of Mark, that guy from the Chen study, in his desire to be like those who are popular and developing a parasocial relationship, particularly with those creators who have higher credibility because they have more clout and they have more followers. These are the people that are particularly persuasive and influential online.
Contrapoints is the only YouTuber. All other YouTubers are cancelled. As far as I'm concerned, she is the most subscribed to personality literally everywhere because no one else on the internet exists.
That's clearly sarcasm, but as this video goes on, it's going to become increasingly difficult to tell the sincerity of the sarcasticity as he begins to call for violence. You know, as you do.
She is our dark queen, our glorious mother and comrade. All hail Contrapoints, for she shall lead us out of darkness.
Okay, now it's just getting a little bit creepy here, even if it's supposed to be a joke. Sincerely, this reads like someone decided to add a registered sex offender character into a Kingdom Hearts game.
Bexy, Uncle Mickey's coming over. I told him to say that.
I told him to say that.
Usually when I talk about content creators I like or dislike, I look at sort of an evolution of their content from start to finish. But because some of Natalie's content is constructed to be a point of discovery and other videos are more intense and insighty, it's probably best to study her instead in the order that you would be recommended viewing her.
If your definition of how we should judge content creators is based entirely on their past work, as you state here, Quinton, then you should have included information about Contrapoints' previous channels. I personally do not think that's a fair stick to judge people by, for as a wise man, a scholar, snake wrangler, and statutory once said,
people changes.
But you should at least note, if that's your measuring stick, that Contrapoints was originally more of an anti-SJW kind of typical channel. And if your criteria for judging channels and judging people on the internet is based on their development, and your point in this video is to get other people to believe that they should feel similarly to you, because it's the only morally correct way to think, wouldn't it be wise to point out that Contrapoints, like yourself, used to be an anti-SJW leaning content creator? Just saying.
One of the first Contrapoints videos I saw was her classic piece Incels, which analyzes the online movement of men who believe that they are celibate involuntarily and are thus to some extent oppressed.
Yeah, and there are femcels who believe that too, just to point it out. You can watch my video on that as well.
The reason that the incel video is so highly regarded and great is that she manages to cover it from two perspectives. The first is the obvious misogyny behind the movement, that it exists off of the pretense that a woman's single role in a man's life is as a sexual partner, and the active perception of various women in the movement are based entirely around if they're f***able and why they wouldn't f*** the incels either way.
What about the female body is inherently misogynistic, and why the hell did you blur out Stacy's beautiful plump breasts? Should she be ashamed of her body and not want to show it off, Quinton? Seems like booby shaming to me. Seriously though, it's a joke. Do you want me to blur out Chad's terrifying trouser armadillo because that makes you feel uncomfortable? Because I'm not going to.
My plump, juicy breasts are none of your goddamned business, and you're one to talk, you chubby little queer.
This is kind of a weird thing to say, considering we've already been over the power of physical appearance on parasocial relationships, and considering that Contrapoints' aesthetic is highly related to her extravagant and elaborate costumes and the appearance of her sets. I think her costuming is one of the coolest things about her videos, but this seems to be just a bit hypocritical.
Obviously, she still demonizes those involved, because by all accounts she definitely should, but she still manages to put into context how so many people end up in that position.
Provide me some evidence why they should be demonized, why you believe them to be made unhuman because of their political opinions. I know you've said crap like that on Twitter before, because I've sure seen it, but what about a political belief makes someone unhuman to you, Quinton? Sure, you've got takes so hot they should be mounted in the back of a truck and filled with people on meat hooks who had information about the—
Saying that every angry gamer is trying to be James Rolfe is like saying that every racist gamer is trying to be JonTron.
I don't like where this is going.
But I don't think you're subhuman, Quinton. And maybe it sounds patronizing because I'm dabbing on your silly, weird video, but I'm honestly kind of concerned. I used to like your content, man. That's pretty much half the reason I decided enough was enough, and I had to respond. Because I think you're probably a smart, pretty funny guy, and it's sad to see you become so invested in a parasocial relationship that it is seemingly overtaking your entire personality with a new assumed social identity. Our social identities are defined by the people that we associate with, and our parasocial relationships are our friends, which means that a parasocial relationship extends to our social identity and ultimately our personal identity when you allow it to get this bad. Don't you live a similar life to the people that you are demonizing, that you are unhumaning, as illustrated in your opening inoculation? I honestly can't tell if this is projection or penitence for your past beliefs and behavior that's causing cognitive dissonance within your newfound identity. But either way, again, I don't think this is healthy.
It's a message of, hey incels, the way you are is bad, and it's mostly your fault. But just because you are where you are doesn't mean you can't change.
So, you mean socially awkward people, which is some cases, or in many other cases, just rationally cautious people who are terrified that lewd hand-holding might slap them with a sexual assault case, or get them fired from their job and kicked out of an industry that they've been a major part of for their entire adult lives because they ate a jelly bean in front of a woman and made her feel uncomfortable. Because if you don't believe that last thing is real, oh, it's absolutely real and it's about to go to court. That's why people are afraid. and it's a rational fear.
Indeed, a lot of the video is dedicated to discussing how incel culture is based around telling men in the movement that they will never find companionship or happiness because they are too ugly for anyone to ever want to be with.
It's true, you're right. Men put other men down. But so do girls. And girls put men down. And everyone does it all across the sexes. It's also not necessarily a bad thing. Culpeper, 1996, defined and seminally examined this phenomena in his analysis of impoliteness theory, and Leach, 1986, similarly in his analysis of the banter principle. Slogowski and Turnbull, 1988, provided an early test of these kinds of relationships, with perceptions of an insult being sarcastic or literal, and found that more people believed a literal insult was sarcastic when given to a distant friend than a compliment given to a distant friend. And moreover, people believed that two individuals were closer to each other, they were better friends, they were more intimate when they shared insults rather than sharing compliments. That's kind of normal human communication. Being a bit of a prick to your friends is part of being a part of a group, which is why we can see it even across language barriers. For example, Mugford 2013 found that German and French foreign exchange students in Mexico quickly acclimated to the usage of a local insult word, gooey, hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Mexican respondents viewed foreign use of this word as an attempt to become more friendly, because Quinton, that's how people communicate social identity, by sharing ironic insults. And you should know that, as it's particularly prevalent on YouTube, as seen in Blivich 2010, who looked at YouTube comments and found positive impoliteness was the most common form of impoliteness used on the platform. In other words, you should know this. I know it's a no-duh finding. It's normal human speech. Also, can we please get some more empirical quantitative research on anti-normative politeness, ironic rudeness, and bant research? Guys, there's a real dearth there.
Her point is, universally, these men do have the capabilities of finding what they want if they just change their personalities enough to be approachable in social groups. And the community standard of disputing this and saying that every single virgin in America has some certain quality about their physical appearance which is unchangeable and will thus make them alone forever and ever, only makes it less likely that they'll ever get around to becoming self-actualized, and thus they'll probably never pop the cherry.
You cannot fundamentally change aspects of your personality. And frankly, it's dangerous for you to suggest people do that. It's dangerous also for men, in many cases, given the nature of the United States legal system, to want to engage with women when they can prosecute them so easily, when they can do what Monica Rial has done to Vic Mignogna. It's obvious why this is a fear. Moreover, while personal growth is always a good thing and you should always seek to better yourself, you are asking people to essentially be fake, to not be themselves because you find something about the self repugnant.
No, I think we're gonna have to...
I am who I am.
Right, but
yeah,
let's do who you
let's
are minus
pretend
the
like
horn
you're not
stings.
who you are and just try to attract a woman.
It's not all about physical appearance, but some of it is unquestionably. Just look at all of the women on Tinder and other sites similar that give height requirements for any interested guys. How is some manlet supposed to change his height, Quinton? Stretch him out like little brother from Riget?
But I think it's generally important to point out how her videos are often made with deeper points that no one really asks her to include, which I think is a mark of her content which makes her a lot more interesting than other channels.
Yeah, she does go far more in depth than most people do on this website. I will absolutely agree to that. But a wade through the depths of most minds would scarcely get your feet wet, at least on YouTube. So I'm not sure that's saying much.
Out of all the topics that Natalie has covered in her series, the most well-known of these has almost certainly been her discussions of the LGBTQ community.
I'm confused why your representation of the LGBTQ community is two Transformers with a massive size difference. So again, weird flex, but okay.
Many of these videos just scratch the surface in a way which will likely appeal to people who don't have many resources to be told about these things openly.
What does she mean by this?
These days, ignorance is a choice. We all have equal access to the web pretty much, so this seems pretty condescending to me. Is this like the black people are so stupid they can't get IDs, so we shouldn't require IDs to vote? Is that the kind of level of condescension that you're on right now, my dude? Because it sure sounds like it.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie.
One of her characters, which she has been playing for a long time, is the Nazi, who is, well, a Nazi. The joke of her character is that despite clearly being a fascist and even dressing up like one, many of the characters on the show outright refuse to admit that she is alt-right. Where the character comes too close to home is when she will end up actually quoting modern white supremacist rhetoric word for word, petitioning for a white homeland and claiming that representation is oppression against white people, while the centrist characters refuse to decry this as Nazism because when the character is asked if she's a Nazi, she says,
No. Of course not.
She's making a joke that Nazis are obvious and easily identifiable, but apparently what you got out of this is that Nazis are hidden and not noticed by their friends and family. And this is a big problem, and it's where this level of persuasion ends up with this video. Because it's being misinterpreted that there's these secret hidden Nazis that are just invisible to their friends and family, is why people end up throwing cement-laden milkshakes at people that they think are Nazis because they were told to think they were Nazis online. I think you actually misunderstood her joke, but then again, maybe I do. Maybe that is what she meant. I can't really say.
Through this, Natalie criticizes not just extremists, but those who stand next to them and pretend like they aren't a part of what's wrong.
First of all, great guilt by association, guy. If you want to debate someone's ideas because you disagree with them, well, now you're associated with that person, aren't you, because you spoke to them. As we saw from the completely scientific study of influencers released last year that puts Tim, hey guys, did I remember to tell you that I'm still on the left pool? Love you, Tim, but let's be honest.
I didn't grow up having any kind of white identity or anything like that because, as many of you know, Tim Pool, he's gonna say it, Mrs. Obama, get down! I'm mixed race.
And associated him with Dickie Spency, and this is the kind of hard scientific information you're looking for on YouTube?
All starting to make sense now, isn't it?
Specifically, her fake show, The Freedom Report, is an overt parody of Dave Rubin's The Dave Rubin Report, which Natalie rightfully criticizes for featuring extremist talking points without having on guests who would then challenge those points, such as herself.
Quinton, how do you debunk the arguments of others if you cannot or refuse to hear them? You started this out with an inoculation, and this is the full dose of the tism now becoming profusely evident. Whether or not you know you're doing it, you're doing it. You have to be able to talk to someone in order to debunk or address their arguments. If you just shut everyone else up and stick your head in the sand, you will never be able to counter their arguments. You will never be able to respond.
But out of all the characters that Natalie has envisioned for her show, perhaps the most fascinating is Tabby, a representation of Natalie's issues with how the left tends to present itself.
Death to capitalism! Hail Satan!
But that is how the left presents itself. I submit for your perusal the Democratic Socialist Convention.
Don't really talk to anybody who doesn't have a credential. Don't talk to cops. Don't talk to MAGA assholes.
No personal privilege?
Yes.
Please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
Or is that not real somehow? You don't see any way in which the left is radicalized, it's only the right? By the way, in completely unrelated news, I bet it'll be really cheap to take a flight to Dayton, Ohio for the next couple of months. Maybe I'll go there for the Renaissance Festival.
Now, I feel like I'm in a weird position with this character, where I know that she was intended to mock the public image that the left often has, and yet I unironically love everything about her. I think that in a world where so many in the trans community are victims of acts of violence in the West, there's something so cathartic about a trans woman who carries around a bat and makes Nazis shit themselves and run away.
This says everything. You identify with the character intended to take a jab at the left. Again, I think you are fundamentally not getting her jokes. Maybe I'm not, but I definitely think you aren't. You identify with the person that she is making fun of. The right-wing equivalent of this would be someone making a 1488 joke, and the dude next to him going, yeah man, sounds good to me.
The Democrats are the real racists.
No, goddammit, we are.
I know that it's also probably not a good image to outsiders, and that's the point, but I frankly don't care, and don't expect me to because I just don't.
Wow, some self-awareness, you think? You think normies will side with violent communists? You think normies want to be associated with this?
This man has just been attacked right here.
Keep the guys as well. Did they say cops raid you?
I'm trying to see what was going on with the black guy who was pushed down on the ground by the cops.
So you're trying to be a witness?
Yeah, they wouldn't allow me to do that. They pushed me back and shot me.
What is your stance here, Quinton? Screw the optics, I'm going in? Never go full bread tube.
Natalie really is an incredible talent of breaking down issues and explaining not only why they influence other things in the world, but also how they are influenced by a larger design, by something out of their hands. But I didn't generally choose to make a video like this just to talk about why I like her, but also to discuss a lot of the positive influence that she has brought forth comprehensively.
This is just weird. It would be one thing if this was all just a reaction to one of her videos, but it's not what it is. It's a strange shrine carved entirely out of extra firm tofu to his
Dark Queen.
And sorry, but it's a bit disturbing.
Natalie.
I call on the power of thy sacred shrine, bastion of sanity in this crazy mixed up world in which we live.
It's become quite a noticeable trend in the past year that people who are bad or on the path to being really bad have suddenly found themselves breaking free of those chains and slipping loose of the indoctrination and making a better path for themselves.
Oh, I see you also read another very scholarly article that lumped Philip DeFranco again in with Richard Spencer. You read that one too, did you, Quinton? Your side is the better path. You are on the right side of history. You know, I back up everything I say with data, because I can't even comprehend being so self-assured of my self-virtue to think that absolutely everyone who even vaguely disagrees with me is a literal World War II baddie. But that's where we're at. And this is why this is terrifying, and this is the power of parasocial relationships' effect on the psyche.
I've seen a lot of people like Harris and philosophy too brought up in those discussions, but it's Natalie specifically that I've seen brought up the most. For some reason, her videos are very good for helping people.
Why are you saying all of this while she's caressing corn dogs? You know how you go to some shitty subreddit that advertises itself as having cursed images and it's just boring normie tier crap? No, this is a cursed sequence.
Realize that their points of view are just flawed or very misguided, and it helps them realize that they want to change.
You can't even consider any viewpoint other than yours could have any merit whatsoever. This is parasocial relationships becoming social identification incarnate. That's why I wanted to respond to this. You have developed a farcical, because it is farcical, relationship with someone whose content you like, and as such have adopted her ideas as your own because you feel as if she is your friend, and our friends influence our opinions. If anything, this should be a major red flag that indicates the precise power of social influencers over the mind of others. Because when we view someone as our friend, parasocially, they become part of our perceived social groups. And as such, we can change our social identity, a fundamental part of our sense of self, to be more in line with our friend. Parasocial relationships are experienced emotionally the exact same way as actual face-to-face interpersonal relationships are. And that's why this makes sense, but also why this is kind of terrifying.
And the question to me is, why specifically does she have this effect on people while others might not? I think a big aspect of it is that her videos are just artistically brilliant and incredible to look at.
I'm sure you think something here is incredible to look at, but this really brings up another important point, which is the importance of peripheral route cues. The elaboration likelihood model, initially identified by Petty and Cacioppo in 1981, is probably one of the most heavily researched theories in the entire field of persuasive human communication, and it posits that there are two methods of conveying information: central and peripheral route. Central route processing is when we pay attention to the content of a persuasive message, while peripheral route processing is when we pay attention to other things, such as appearance, slick editing, humor, and just general style. When it comes to political persuasion, Dr. Drew Westen posits in his book, The Political Brain, that people who are already partisan are incapable of being persuaded, and we'll get more into that in a moment. But he also posits that emotional, peripheral appeals are far more persuasive to non-partisans than logical arguments. This is not to say Contra doesn't make any central route arguments, and on that point, and I'm absolutely guilty of this myself, longer and more complex messages, centrally processed, produce more recall in people who hear that message, as found in Wood, Colgreen, and Pazer, 1985, who found that people were more likely to remember a message that was long and complex, likely because these complicated messages are seen as more credible when discussing difficult or nuanced topics. Like I said, I'm 100% guilty of that, but frankly, that's because I want to make sure you, dear listener, has all of the available information that's relevant that I can possibly provide in a YouTube video. And I hope the Contrapoints and H-Bomber Guy and those other kinds of people have that same intent. But when we look specifically at Contrapoints, her appearance, both physically and in the thematics of her video, are very persuasive from a peripheral route processing standpoint. And we can see evidence of this in the data. For example, Kale and Homer 1985 found that people were more likely to recall information about a product and be more favorable towards that product when it was shilled for by an attractive celebrity. A more recent study from Trampe et al. 2010 reports similar findings, in that people have more positive attitudes towards a product when it is being sold by an attractive person, particularly when the viewer is processing peripherally and not centrally. Pretty people are persuasive. No shit. But again, I gotta show the data. And the only time when a pretty face doesn't increase positive attitudes towards whatever the model is selling is when people are having a big central route think, and the product isn't related to the visuals. What you're selling isn't related to what you're showing. Additionally, having no model produces significantly less persuasion than any model at all. Except, again, when processing centrally, and when the subject is irrelevant to the visuals. The point is, Contrapoints' videos and messages are more persuasive because of what Quinton has just told us. Her sets and her style are easy on the eye, and that makes everything she says more credible, more believable, and more persuasive. There's another thing that Quinton talks a lot about in this video that's indicative of the persuasive power of peripherals, and that's Contrapoints' skits. For more information on that, we should look at instructional humor processing theory, initially proposed by Wanzer, Freimeyer, and Irwin in 2010. They found that students tended to learn more when a teacher used humor that was related to the topic being discussed. Hackathorn et al. 2011 replicated their research, found the same thing, that humor increases comprehension and learning. Again, I'm guilty of this. I do it all the time. It's precisely why I put a bunch of humorous media clips that are related to the topic in my videos, because I want to increase your retention of otherwise kind of dry, boring social science crap. Because instructional humor processing posits that humor helps create a bond between the teacher and the student, or in the case of YouTube, the parasocial bond between the creator and the viewer. And this aids in retention and learning outcomes of whatever that creator is talking about. And whether she knows this or not cognitively, her skits peripherally help persuade people towards her opinions because of the use of related humor, which is potentially related to higher credibility, as found by Roth 2012, who found that people who thought Jon Stewart was funny also found him more credible, and when they watched a humorous political show, in this case The Daily Show, they expressed more ego involvement, more self-involvement, and greater subsequent political participation. Anyway, let's get back to the soy.
There's not a single video of hers that doesn't adhere to some aesthetic and isn't absolutely breathtaking to take in.
Stop it.
Arguably her best work is the projects that come across as sort of short films, because she is seriously such an incredible filmmaker. And in a way, I think it makes a lot of sense that this aspect helps her points get across. It's always been a big trend that people who seek to regress our culture.
Regress our culture? Like into a puritanical-esque nightmare reality where the moral police, you, as you've already asserted your moral infallibility, get to paint a scarlet letter on the backs of anyone who steps out of line and doesn't agree with you? Who is the regressive again, Reverend Wilson?
Spread their beliefs through emphatic speeches and waves of anger and really nice clothing.
Well, good to see that you're not using the tactics of the enemy.
Really nice clothing.
But again, you can see my comments on how peripheral route processing makes things like wearing pretty clothing more persuasive.
And progressive people, meanwhile, have a much stronger grasp on the arts and spread their ideals through that means, in a way which, at the time, can get them in a lot of trouble, but generally has a more long-standing effect on popular culture.
Okay, so around this point, I have to explain how political persuasion works in a little bit more detail. In his book, The Political Brain, Dr. Drew Westen, who worked on the second Obama campaign, makes a very strong point as to why you can't persuade partisans. Because their political identity is a core aspect of the South. And because it's a core aspect of the South, it's unlikely to be changed, because that's who I am. Partisans are not persuadable, but centrists are. When we look at social penetration theory, a favorite of mine just because of the name, I mean, of course, but also because every single example of it used by professors and researchers to explain this is a reference to Shrek.
Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it. We both have layers.
It illustrates, though, that when these ideas are close to our deep sense of self, they're core and they're unlikely to change. Hence, partisans are unpersuadable. But further in Westen's book, which I highly recommend to anyone interested in political persuasion, and it will be linked below, he suggests that for non-partisans, people capable of changing their minds, peripheral cues are more important than direct central messages. He notes the success of the Clinton campaign being summarized in his ad titled Home, the serendipitous name of Bill Clinton's hometown in Arkansas, from whence he hails. The ad makes him appear human, friendly, unbelievable for Clinton, I know, likable. He's one of us. He's from home. Westen contends this is also why Obama's Hope campaign was so successful, because Obama and Clinton used emotional appeals and visuals. They didn't use arguments because arguments are boring and people tune out. I know that I said earlier that long, complicated explanations are more persuasive, but it depends on how you're processing, centrally or peripherally. And generally speaking, central route processing is boring. Me describing this is boring. Here, have something more interesting, I don't know. Anyway, the point is, this is why people are very easily influenced by peripherals when it comes to political messages over central route processing. Obama's Hope campaign means nothing. There's no real message there. It's all about the optics. And this has been thoroughly illustrated in the years of research specifically on the Kennedy-Nixon debate. It was the first presidential debate to ever be televised. a recent recreation of initial research which showed that while television viewers believed the handsome, charismatic Kennedy won the debate in contrast to Nixon, who had recently been hospitalized and was infirm, sweating under the hot lights of the television cameras, came off as nervous and lost the debate. People who listened to the radio version, however, believed that Nixon had won. Again, a recreation of this earlier research on the debate from Druckmann 2003 consistently finds the same results we found in the 60s, that those who saw the handsome Kennedy versus the sickly Nixon thought Kennedy won the debate, and those who heard the radio audio version only believed Nixon to be the better masked debater, even when accounting for personal political party affiliation. In short, imagery enhances the persuasion of political messages and arguments for those who are moderate or center-leaning in particular, as I believe that Quinton was, based on his previous statements, before he fell down this rabbit hole. The point of all of this is that you can't change the opinions of people who already hold those opinions deeply as part of a sense of the self. Instead, your messages have to fall into a latitude of acceptance in order to be persuasive to those who can be persuaded. This is described in social judgment theory, originally posited by Sheriff 1965. This theory describes that we have latitudes of acceptance, non-committance, and rejection. And subsequently, under rejection, there's a potential for what they call the boomerang effect. In that a persuasive argument meant to change your attitude produces a counter-attitudinal result, emboldening your existing opinions and moving you further away from whatever someone was trying to persuade you to believe. When you want to make a persuasive argument, therefore, you need to try and orient your speech and your tone towards an audience and their anticipated latitude of acceptance, rejection, and non-committal. The best way to do this is to frame your arguments such that they fall into a wide latitude of acceptance for the majority of people, for centrists, harmless arguments, or hidden behind peripheral cues. When you fall into the latitude of acceptance, you can move an individual's opinions, their attitudes, their anchor point, closer to your own. This is why very aggressive messages that exclude others who may have different opinions are less effective and less persuasive than more general ones. But the thing is, this compounds over time, as one's anchor point moves closer and closer to the persuader. So then, does their latitude of acceptance for new ideas become smaller, and their latitude of rejection grows. This is the process through which people become indoctrinated. And when the person persuading you is your parasocial friend, well, they're all the more persuasive now, aren't they?
Yeah, I should like to send him a fan letter telling him how good he was in the episode where he teaches everyone how to cook, but I shouldn't want to type the letter on a death certificate.
Yes, but then you learn that one the hard way, huh?
Salience is also important here, as we can see in Ledgerwood and Chaikin 2007, who found that people who would normally not vote for an elderly healthcare bill were more positive towards the prospect when they saw an elderly person, someone who's an out-group member since they were all young people. We can extend these findings to, say, trans people, or even communist-aligned people, in that when participants saw an elderly person, their identification with the elderly increased, and subsequently, they were more likely to support the elderly politically. Much as we already talked about with the parasocial contact hypothesis, exposure to positive media figures can change our behavior and our beliefs, particularly towards outgroups. This mere exposure, therefore, can increase support, in that people will tend to be more sympathetic to groups that they see positive representations of. My point is that it's easier to move the latitude of acceptance regarding an outgroup when you see a positive representation of that outgroup, be that extreme leftist ideology, transgender status, whatever. It's all bolstered by mere positive exposure. Another thing to note is that attacking outgroup others directly is not effective in persuasion, as illustrated by Sider and Gass, finds that when, for example in their case, when McCain made attack ads against Obama, it was viewed by the public as illustrative of McCain's own incapacity to make good arguments and only rage against his opponent, and thus McCain was viewed more negatively. Attack ads come off poorly. Instead, positive persuasion, which is what I think that Contrapoints does, is far better when attempting to reach that sweet, sweet latitude of acceptance. Contrapoints makes use of parody characters to obfuscate any negative, direct attacks, and this all culminates in the development of messages that are very pleasing to look at and very persuasive to someone who is not previously overtly partisan to a political opinion, like I believe Quinton was.
To purposefully misquote the scholars of our time, the fascists have the outrage. But I don't care for the outrage. What I care about is music. And the communists have the music.
The fascists have the outrage. Huh. I guess that's why they call it outrage culture, isn't it? That's why violence is escalating on both sides, because there's only one side that has the outrage. And you know what? Yeah, sure. Communists have the music. Gee, I'd sure like to play a great communist bit, Hungry Like the Wolf, right now, but I think I'd get copyright struck, so I'll just play this for you instead.
The communists have the music.
I know it's sort of ironic that I'm making a video about Contrapoints and I'm not bringing across any of her aesthetic or audio quality.
Well, at least you admit you're not trying with that background looking like a chromatography test at a gynecologist's office.
But I think that the bigger secondary reason that Contrapoints is able to convert so many people back to the side of good.
Convert people back to the side of good. Your air quotes aren't fooling anyone. Here again we can see the moral superiority based on his social identity and his parasocial relationship.
Is because she makes her videos not just with the motivation of exposing the other side and ridiculing them for having the wrong opinion.
The wrong opinion? Hey, you know, TRO's name is a joke because to claim that somebody has the right opinion on something is arrogant, egotistical, and pretty much just Dunning-Kruger incarnate. You like Star Wars, right, Quinton? Don't only Sith deal in absolutes?
But also of helping them understand why their perspectives are misguided. Here's why I think she is so important to this system.
What system exactly? Conversion, by your own words, to right think? Don't make a conversion therapy joke, Aiden. Stop. I know it's hard, but don't make a conversion therapy joke. Don't make a conversion therapy joke. Ah, shit. There's Mike Pence with his jumper cables again.
As someone who, by my own admission, was pretty far down the anti-feminist rabbit hole, the same rabbit hole which can eventually lead to some pretty dark stuff and has birthed mass murderer after mass murderer.
We have seen escalation has increased on both the left and the right. This is undeniable. And your denial that there have been no Bernie bros and Antifa members who have committed heinous acts of violence is evidence of the depths of your indoctrination via this parasocial relationship, which has changed your social identity, which I think you're seemingly openly espousing others should join you in. To not acknowledge that there is violence on both sides, and that the violence is escalating because of this black and white perception that you have, by your own admission that you were taught, is evidence of the danger in becoming radicalized in any capacity via these parasocial relationships. This is wherein social identity and these parasocial relationships do become a problem when face threat is involved. Face threat is a threat to our sense of identity, and it further radicalizes people into becoming associated with their in-group, feeling that there is a threat towards that in-group and wanting to protect it. As seen in Brewer 1999, social group differences in groups and out-groups do not inherently produce hatred towards one another. Generally, it's really just a preference towards the in-group and ambivalence towards the out-group, until that group is threatened. Probably because of what he hears on the media every day, Quinton feels his new in-group is being threatened. And when taken in tandem with the perception of an ongoing threat to my social group, to my friends, even if it's a parasocial friend, this does potentially develop into hatred. And what is being espoused here is the absolute abandonment of civility and the re-education of these subhuman outgroups. It's a result of the reorientation of self and group identity based on perceived face threat. This is de-individuation towards the group. I am no longer an individual, I am a part of this group. And this is particularly strong online when more individuated with the anonymous factors that go into internet communication, where social group membership often tends to supersede our personal identities, as seen in the social identity model of de-individuation effects posited by Spears and Lee in 1994. And with the addition of the effects of Walther's hyperpersonal model, which causes us to form relationships very quickly online, and the psychology of parasocial relationships, this makes the internet a rife tool for indoctrination, which Quinton here is seemingly openly saying is a good thing. I don't think Contrapoints is necessarily trying to indoctrinate anyone, but we can see that she has, apparently.
I have to say that I don't fully believe that I was there just by chance. Instead, I fully believe that YouTube actively promotes reactionary content which is filled with sensationalism over level-headed stuff which actually speaks the truth, entirely because the former makes them more money.
That's why Alex Jones is on YouTube. Yeah, that's why he's still around, along with a lot of other, as you say, reactionary creators. Oh, wait a minute, where's Uncle AJ, man? I can't seem to find InfoWars anywhere on my feed. I sure find Contrapoints. Where's Uncle Alex? Because we're the ones in power. That's why mainstream media outlets run reports that positively talk about Contrapoints and shill her channel. Oh wait, it's all the opposite of that, isn't it? And you're completely clueless.
What do I do, Lord?
Think about it. The YouTube algorithm exists to maximize Google's profits. It promotes channels which post more often, more than those who post less, because more people go through all the videos and see all the ads, yada yada yada. You get the drill. We've talked about this before.
Why don't you mention people like TLDR or Alternative Hypothesis? People who put massive amounts of research and work into their videos to report on science. Is it just because we don't support your exact same political opinion, so that means only research that you like counts? The term sophomoric exists for a reason, and this is exemplary of a sophomoric take. Look, when I look at research, I look at all of the research, and I provide it openly for you guys to check my facts, because guess what? I screw up all the time. I'll put up the wrong graph, I'll read a number wrong, you guys have seen it. It happens, and I want you to check me on it when you see me mess up. Yet because I hold conservative viewpoints, I guess that's not real work and effort, that's not real research now, is it, Quinton?
When using the data, you should use all of it. Now maybe these are your favorite parts, but this is important too.
I didn't know that was there.
A YouTuber who cares about their topic, who spends months researching it and perfecting it, and makes something actually good, can never truly compete with some talentless jackass who knows absolutely nothing about the topic he's covering and can post whenever he wants because his videos have no substance.
You know, at least he admits that the people that he's mentioning here don't provide their own citations. Well, friends, you can always check my description box for absolutely every single piece of research that I cite, as well as usually recommended additional reading.
People who actually care and are actually smart and actually put effort into their content have always had a hard time competing with channels who can just download a BuzzFeed video, put it in Premiere, edit pauses into it, dub their voiceover, claim that the video represents all of that political topic, host it the same day, and repeat that about 4 times a week.
Look, you may find it boring and low effort, but I know plenty of news channels like Hard Bastard or Tim Pool that provide a quick, to-the-point analysis of what's actually happening in the world, and they're far more high energy on average than this pulseless rambling, so it's not for you. Whatever. There's no arguing taste.
Essentially, imagine if you lived in a world where for every topic you ever wanted to discover more about in your youth, the person who explained it to you was Leafy is here.
Then go investigate yourself and don't rely on entertainers for your information exclusively. A lot of times people will use my videos as sources, and I'm really flattered by that, but I put all the studies and all the books in the description because you guys should investigate for yourselves if you have any free time and you have any desire. Be an autodidact. Educate yourself. If this sounds hypocritical coming from me, maybe it is, but you can't rely exclusively on YouTubers who demystify reality for you, Quinton. Also, if Leafy is low energy, then this is lower energy than George Michael's pacemaker. Ugh, let's get back to it.
Saying that the other side of the debate is just better at winning in the marketplace of ideals is inherently dishonest, because in many cases, that side is the only side that's being promoted.
Let me ask you a question. How many right-wing media outlets are there? Arguably Fox News? Who else? Yeah, only one side is being promoted. That's why Contrapoints gets media articles written about her that shill her channel. All the people like James Alsop are completely demonetized. That's because only one side has the power, right? That's why Google curates their search results.
For the longest time, when I Googled trans, I didn't get intelligent news reports or scientific studies.
Well, let's Google trans. Oh, look, I don't see anything negative about trans people whatsoever. Because as Project Veritas has exposed, Google does curate their search results to favor progressive and positive portrayals of trans people and women and negative portrayals of men. Quinton, this is a lie on its face, but your latitude of acceptance has moved so far to the left of sanity because of your new social identity and because of your parasocial relationship with your bread-tube idols that probably to even look at such conflicting information would not only fall outside of your latitude of acceptance or even fall within your latitude of non-committance, but outright into your latitude of rejection and even possibly result in boomerang effects because you can't even comprehend that things could be different than your morally righteous standpoint.
I see nothing. I was not here. I did not even get up this morning.
This is what happens when social identity becomes so important and that social identity receives any kind of face threats to its claims or beliefs. They're all summarily denied. They're called fake news, and the latitude of acceptance moves further and further towards the maintenance of existing beliefs, and persuasion becomes impossible, and you have become a partisan. Where this becomes particularly dangerous is that the effect of uncertainty and face threat, being faced with something like conflictory information to your existing group beliefs, actually generates increased group identification with those who do hold radical political beliefs, rather than moderate ones, as we can see in Hogg, Meehan, and Farquharson 2010. This is why it's so difficult, seemingly, to talk rationally with partisans this far down the rabbit hole. Any information you provide them that runs counter to what they already believe only makes them more emboldened in their group identity and their existing beliefs. This is why Dr. Westen argues you cannot persuade partisans, and if you want to persuade an average person, facts and information are boring in comparison to compelling emotional and peripheral displays. But the thing is, once you've got someone on the hook with flashy visuals, activating their peripheral processing, in addition to long explanations that contain a lot of information being more persuasive, you continue to move their latitude of acceptance of new ideas. What this all means is that using both central and peripheral cues, as Contra does, as well as all YouTubers, I do as well, is try to make good-looking content that pleases the eyes of the viewers, in addition to making a strong argument. This produces a great deal of persuasion towards whatever the argument is, but alone, persuasion is not so simple. It comes in tandem with a lot of other variables. In his famous book on influence, Dr. Robert Cialdini lays out 6 principles of persuasion that hinge on these peripherals. Reciprocity, feeling like someone did you a solid and you owed them one back. Scarcity, feeling as though if you don't act now, you'll never be able to have this chance again, going to VidCon, for example. Authority, which is self-explanatory, but one need only remember the Milgram obedience experiments to see just how influential a person with a lab coat or a position of power is over human behavior. Consistency, as I mentioned earlier, we seek to avoid cognitive dissonance as it's psychologically discomforting, and to keep our behaviors as uniform as possible to avoid this internal conflict. Liking, you could call this again homophily, or attractiveness, which we've covered. And consensus, the feeling that everyone agrees with this. And when the mainstream media runs wall-to-wall orange man bad all day every day and promotes Contrapoints, well then it's no surprise why these messages are so persuasive. Every single one of Cialdini's principles can be seen here in our case study of Quinton reviews, and is precisely why the power of persuasion has so gripped this man. All YouTubers use these principles to some degree, be they aware or not that they're using them. But this is an exemplar of the most unfortunate outcome of having a very strong parasocial relationship with a very persuasive person.
You can't magically change your gender. You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
So legally change it. People recognize.
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Wow. You can't change your birthday, so you can't change your gender.
Look, the kosher shrimp man is right. You can change your outward sexual characteristics with hormone therapy and surgery, but you can't change your genetics. I'm sorry, that's just reality. I wish there was a pill I could give people to make them not feel gender dysphoria, but I can't.
Debating the way Ben Shapiro does is the intellectual equivalent of starting an argument with someone and then pointing a laser pointer in their face so they're too distracted to respond, and then turning to a third person and saying, "See, their argument doesn't even make sense."
He asked her a question. Can you physically change your age? No. Can you physically change your XY chromosomes? No. That's the question being asked. If her argument made any sense, then she could respond. You think she can't respond because he's bullying her? Did you ever consider that she can't respond because there's no response to this argument?
I mean, I don't even have to tell you that Ben Shapiro argues in bad faith.
As you argue in bad faith, but I don't have to tell you, I've already shown the audience.
The difference between Contrapoints and Ben Shapiro is that Contrapoints argues for the sake of helping the other side and the uninformed understand the topics, and Ben Shapiro makes arguments for the sake of confusing the other side to convince the uninformed that his argument is exclusively the only one that makes sense.
They do the same thing. They mock the other side to convince people that their side is right. This is how politics work. I certainly have opinions in my videos, everybody does, but the sheer incapacity to recognize that Contrapoints has anything in common with the alt-light Israelite is frankly astonishing. As a case study, again, in the effects of social identity and parasocial relationships put on display for us here today, friends.
That's why when someone in his own party simply asked him to explain his perspective, he threw a hissy fit, called them a liberal, and stormed out of the show. In the same way that a baby has a low tolerance for pain, Ben Shapiro has a low tolerance for actual discourse.
And Contrapoints fans don't get irrationally upset when someone insults her or even mildly criticizes her, right? A creator named Beige Frequency, whose content I like a lot, made what I would consider to be a pretty neutral documentary recently on Contrapoints, which I'll link below. And even his fair take, and tell me if I'm wrong on that, was mildly brigaded because it was nothing short of complete sycophancy. This is why people are afraid to criticize Contrapoints. Not because of her arguments, but because of how rabid her fanbase are. They are extremely supportive, and she has also mainstream media support that those of us who might want to bring up reasonable responses to her videos would often avoid, just knowing that people like you worship her. And it's weird, man. This has changed from a parasocial relationship into outright idol worship.
And yes, this is your rug, and yes, that's your lamp, and yes, these are your pants. Don't worry, not crazy, just a fan.
And that's why the other side seems so hesitant to attack Natalie or to even mention her. There's no single-sentence witty comeback that universally destroys a Contrapoints video. There's no way to pause her, or cut her up, or put her out of context and misrepresent her arguments. And even if you could pull that off, it would only end with your fans actually watching her, and then they wouldn't be your fans anymore because her content is actually good.
And again, no one breaks down my videos either, because that would take time and effort and require people to read scientific studies. And then I ask you, my dear friends and viewers, to figure out for yourself what you think those data mean. Now, I'm taking a lot of risk by making this video. First, because Quinton has a history of filing false DMCA claims when people critique his content, and secondly because Contra's fans, as you can see from this video, can be kind of rabidly obsessive. I'm risking my own channel by saying anything even mildly critiquing her because of the institutional power bestowed on some creators, both by the media and from YouTube itself. We have seen YouTubers be propped up by the platform for no reason other than it's what YouTube wants to promote. People are afraid in the knowledge that we do not have the support of YouTube, and we definitely don't have the support of mainstream news in the way that someone like Contrapoints does. Quinton makes this fact even clearer by saying that people will leave to watch Contrapoints videos rather than to watch someone addressing her arguments because only her content is worth watching and good. So really, I task you, Quinton, debunk this video. Read a single study that I cited here. Learn about any of the theories. Pick one. If I wanted to watch someone eat pussy like this, I'd watch an uncensored version of The Lion King on LiveLeak.
I wanted to highlight what is, in my opinion, the best example of a bad commentary channel trying to epically destroy Natalie. It's called Why Contrapoints is the New Anita Sarkeesian. Honey, it's 2019. Get a new boogeyman.
Shit, it's the Nazis.
A little too ironic. Epic takedown, totally debunked. Didn't you know it's current year? We just went from LiveLeak directly up to WorldStar up in here now, didn't we?
The internet has become a dark, infected place, which has the power to both entertain and indoctrinate. And for us to have any chance of fixing this, to have any possibility of making the internet anything more than a burning dumpster fire, there's something you have to do. You have to subscribe to Contrapoints.
You've already said that Contrapoints, via your parasocial relationship with her, indoctrinated you into a belief system. So in order to avoid indoctrination, you should subscribe to a channel that he admits indoctrinated him. Wow, that sounds like a real rip-snorting good time. Also, Jesus, I know I talk fast, but could I get a Nightcore version of this video? It's so low energy.
And you can't just stop there. You have to bring Contra to your friends, your family, your enemies, everyone!
If you have some kind of weird shrine of me, I'm gonna be very unhappy. It's just a poster with a few candles. It's very tasteful.
Show it to your teachers, your crush, your weird uncle who makes you uncomfortable at family get-togethers.
Neat of you to imply that Tim Pool, in the most unflattering image I'm sure you could find of him, is some kind of sex pest? I hate to imply that you even could punch down, but you're certainly trying to take a good swing at it now, aren't you? I don't know if you were reminded recently, because Tim sure never reminds us, but Tim Pool is a mixed-race, left-leaning skater dude who was once homeless, Quinton. He's not a... what did you call yourself again?
Pale, chubby YouTubers with beards born out of their lack of motivation to shave, and all of them wearing clothes which don't quite fit their bodies.
Right, he's not that. That's you. The projection here is evident. You disliked something about yourself. You changed social identities via your parasocial relationship, and you reinvented your sense of self around that relationship, moving your latitude of acceptance so far left via this parasocial persuasion.
Print it on a cake, put posters around your town, scribble it on the side of an egg before slamming it on the head of your local fascist.
Well, there we have it. Here's the call for violence. Remember, first it's an egg, then it's a milkshake, then it's a milkshake with cement in it, then it's Dayton, Ohio. This is how you make a radical. By moving the goalposts via social judgment theory, continually shifting the latitude of acceptance and the latitudes of rejection and non-committance. This is someone being actively indoctrinated in real time to go from talking about how pretty he thinks a YouTuber is into calling for active assault against people he disagrees with. And people sit around wondering why intergroup political violence is escalating in this country. This, right here, is why it's escalating.
Because Contrapoints has the power to save people. And if we can bring that power to the masses, then we all win.
Well, that's downright evangelical. Do you believe that you are saved, son? Did Contra Christ come down and absolve you of your sins of wrongthink? It doesn't matter how much you perceive her as a Christ figure, friend. She's never going to let you nail her, particularly when all you have to work with is a hammer and a sickle. This is exactly why parasocial relationships can occasionally be harmful, as we've discussed, in fostering this type of celebrity worship.
I'm just realizing as I film this that this video is probably going to be my most intellectually upfront and honest video I've done in a while.
I'm so sorry. If this is intellectual honesty and upfrontness, then it makes Schindler's List look like Blazing Saddles.
I mean, it's not that I've been lying in my content, but it's more that I've been taking a huge piece of my personality and sort of putting it on simmer for about 6 months. You know, just putting little Easter eggs and little references here and there.
Hate Trump?
Remember, subscribe, show Contrapoints.
Look, I know this is a weird video for me, and as usual, a long one, but I truly have never come across such a perfect exemplar of someone being completely indoctrinated via parasocial relationships, such that they end up moving their entire political latitude of acceptance, altering their personality and their fundamental social identities. Then this is an incredible case study. And what makes it worse is there's absolutely no sense of how obvious it is to the viewer of what's actually going on here in his speech. He's trying to convince others to mimic this behavior, in fact. I obviously mean no ill will to Quinton. I just think this is a fantastic case study on how persuasive media figures can be, particularly ones that we feel we have a strong parasocial relationship with, how that relationship can be exacerbated, what makes it stronger, who is the most influential, and how they can alter our own identities and beliefs when we feel as if we are friends with media figures online. The power of social media influence extends well beyond selling gamer girl bathwater. It extends to beliefs, attitudes, and social identity, which ultimately all extends to the sense of the self, personal identity. I love a lot of content creators on this platform, as I'm sure many of you do, dear viewer. And I'm not saying to stop subscribing and stop listening to people because of this potential deleterious effect, but there's an important message to take away from this little case study we've done, and that is that parasocial relationships, given we experience them emotionally the same as real friendships, are extremely influential. And we have to be aware of how that influence may affect not just what we watch or what we buy, but what we think. And with that in mind, what do you guys think? Was I too harsh on Quinton? Is this really a case study in parasocial persuasion and indoctrination? Or is it an isolated incident, not indicative of a real trend? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And thank you so much for the ongoing support, particularly to my wonderful patrons and my supporters on Subscribestar and Streamlabs. If you guys liked this video, please head over to one of those sites and consider checking it out. I deeply, deeply appreciate it. As I said, everything that I talked about today is linked in the description, as well as a couple books if you want to read more about the general topic. I particularly highly recommend Drew Westen's book, The Political Brain, as it's an easy and truly illuminating read. Finally, if for some reason you want to see more of my pedantry, then you can check me out every Tuesday on Nuckalavee's channel where we play Pathfinder. But truly, thank you guys for sitting through this very long video and analysis. I don't normally do stuff like this, but I figured, you know, once in a while it's okay. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell because people don't get notifications from me anymore, and because, unlike Contrapoints, YouTube does not promote my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, dear friends, Altana Volt.